Thank you very much for coming. Can you hear me? Is it loud? Am I loud enough? Sort of? Yeah? Okay. So, we thought Sara was an amazing woman and she really loved books so much. So she came to the Strand a lot, but we thought that we would start with her favorite book and just kind of launch into it, and I could do a reading of it for a while. Then we can go out and have some tea. So without further ado, let's just start.
Can you see it?
You know what? Let's pass on that. Forget it. Okay. All right. We won't do that. I'm going to do a reading of Sara Berman's Closet, which is not as long as War and Peace, but almost a few hours. You're doing anything at midnight, and then we can have a little conversation. And if there are any questions, we can try to answer them. So, this is a book about Sara and her journey to America and eating lemon ices and the meaning of time. In the little village of Lenin in Belarus, there lived a large and reasonably happy family. They lived in a collection of shacks next to the muddy river Sluch. Yes, there were pogroms. Yes, there was deprivation. But life was not all bad. There was a blind goose herder, there were wild blueberry forests where the children ran wild, and a grandfather with a 6-foot-long beard who never spoke. The men were fine, but the women were wondrous. They took care of everything and everyone, and that was a lot. They cleaned and polished, cooked and baked. They washed and starched and ironed and sewed. They put everything in order. They were the heart and soul of the family. There was Hanche and Chirke, Shoshana, Grunichke, Yochi, and Mashke. And Sara, who helped with all the chores and also loved to read. Sara and her older sister Shoshana devoured books. Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, and Chekhov were their friends. They ate cake, they sang, and they danced. For them, life in the village was a dream. Many things happened in this little village. One afternoon, a traveling photographer arrived. All the children had recently had their heads shaved for fear of lice. But Shoshana ran off and cut her hair herself. Her bangs were crooked, but she was proud. A few years later, Sara fell into the muddy river Sluch and almost drowned. But her grandfather threw his beard into the water. Sara grabbed onto it, and he pulled her safely to shore. This also happened. One clear day, Sara's cousin was sitting in his shack, reading a book and drinking a glass of tea. Suddenly, the sky darkened. Rain began to fall, and then a bolt of lightning shot through the window and killed him. Just like that. And still, life goes on. More days passed, full of activity. Everyone knew that being busy was a good part of life. Otherwise, you certainly could go crazy. When Sara was 12, the family decided they had to leave Belarus. They traveled on the SS Polonia to Palestine. There, they would be free. On the boat, Sara was seasick. A sailor gave her an orange, the first she had ever seen. That is the only story that survived the trip. In Palestine, they lived in a shack near the beach. They tried to make it a slightly fancy shack, but sand covered everything. Still, Sara managed to look elegant. Sara's mother sewed outfits copied from European fashion magazines. The women were always washing, ironing, and baking. Friday was the day for super cleaning and super baking. The Middle Eastern sun bleached the laundry a blinding white. Fanatically starched and pressed linens were folded precisely. The clothes were so heavily starched they could get up and walk away. Sara was courageous and ravishing and funny. Everyone was madly in love with her. Gandhi was gaga for her. Kafka was crazy about her. Toscanini proposed marriage, and Miss Gertrude Stein thought she was sublime. Sara met Pesach. He had daring do. He was dapper. They danced the tango under the fluttering awnings of seaside cafes. He pursued her with ardor, and she said yes. On the day of the wedding, she had terrible misgivings, but she hugged Shoshana and went through with it. In Tel Aviv, many things happened. One afternoon, Sarah and Pesach were locked out of their apartment. Pesach decided to climb down from the neighbor's terrace on the 3rd floor to their terrace on the 2nd. Without warning, Pesach slipped and fell off all the way to the ground, but did not get hurt. He was wearing a gray suit. Sarah and Pesach had 2 daughters, Kika and Maira. The family moved to New York City, where they saw their first television set and drank their first Coca-Cola. They read Vogue and Life. They ate egg rolls and spare ribs every Sunday night at Beau Sun restaurant. They went to concerts, museums, operas, and musicals. It was a cultured life. The years went by, as they tend to do. When Kika and Maira went to college, Sarah and Pesach moved back to Tel Aviv. As time passed, the cracks that had been there since the beginning of their relationship could no longer be ignored. Their marriage fell apart. At the age of 60, after 38 years with Pesach, Sarah understood that she had to leave him. One night, she left with just one suitcase, saying goodbye to everything she owned. She cut Pesach out of her life. Literally, she did that. We didn't. That's her handiwork. It was a liberation. Sarah joined her daughters in New York City, a place she loved. She found a small studio apartment at 2 Horatio Street in Greenwich Village. She was happy at last, in a room of her own. Things had changed for the better, which is not always the case, but sometimes is. What was her new life like? She cooked schnitzel and blintzes for the family in her tiny kitchen. She was wild about Fred Astaire and watched all his movies. She read autobiographies. She sat at the kitchen table and ate herring. She watched Jeopardy every night at 7 p.m. She went to the Museum of Modern Art on Wednesdays and ate pizza in the cafeteria. She edited out useless distractions. She cherished the small moments, which, as everyone knows, are the sweetest. Every action was done with care. Every day was filled with precise and brilliant actions. She bought a lemon. She mailed a letter. She wrapped a package. Sarah had found her time. Sarah had found herself. One Friday morning, in a burst of personal expression, she decided to wear only white. She starched, ironed, folded, and stacked everything with loving care and precision. All of it was grand, and her closet was the grandest of all. There was a place for everything, and everything was in its place. She knew what she had. What did she have? 7 bras, 12 t-shirts, 13 pairs of socks, all pressed and neatly folded. Yes, she ironed her underpants and her socks. 1 robe and 2 nightgowns for watching Jeopardy and drinking tea from a glass. 13 blouses, mostly purchased from Loehmann's and Lord & Taylor. At Lord & Taylor, she loved going to the Birdcage restaurant with her daughters to eat a plate of tea sandwiches. Pants. The number is uncertain, but all were pressed with a sharp crease. 9 pairs of shoes. She favored Easy Spirit. 6 fluffy sweaters. 7 white hats. Many linens, tablecloths and sheets and pillowcases, all heavily starched and perfectly ironed. Beauty products and accessories. Pocketbooks and luggage. She used a set of Louis Vuitton suitcases, some real, some fake. A variety of useful objects like a potato grater, a paperweight, and a cookie press for making sesame cookies. There were 3 M & Company watches that she wore at the same time. She used to wear 2, but when her beloved son-in-law Tibor died, she took the one he had worn and added that to the group. One watch was Los Angeles, one watch was New York, and one watch was Tel Aviv time. And there are letters. She and her sister Shoshana wrote letters to each other every week, all the years they lived apart. They wrote about the ups and downs of family life. Both sisters wrote beautifully. Shoshana wrote to Sarah, "Without the ocean, I could not survive." Sarah wrote to Shoshana, "I have taught myself not to worry so much. In the end, all works out well, and worrying is useless and self-destructive." Sarah did not spend all day working on her closet. She did many other things. But the closet was an expression of something that went back to her life in the village of Lenin, a way to create order out of chaos, a way to create a life of beauty and meaning. And that is no small achievement. There were trips to Israel to visit the family. The sisters embraced. Sarah ate a lemon ice on the beach and held it up to the sun. The family gathered one night to celebrate the high holidays. Sarah and Shoshana spent the evening together, singing. It was an enchanted night. The next morning, Sarah did not come down to breakfast. Her end had come in a whisper. When Sarah's family returned to New York from Tel Aviv, it was clear to them that her closet was a work of art that needed to be preserved. They stored all her belongings with the certainty that one day her closet would be an exhibition. 10 years later, in a little museum called Museum, in an alley in Lower Manhattan, Sara Berman's closet opened to the public. They hired a sweeper, a very, very good one. When the exhibit left museum, of course, it moved to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Guards were now watching over Sarah's bras. Inspired by Sarah's simplicity and clarity, people traveled from around the world to see the closet. Today, Sarah's closet makes its way around the world, telling a small and monumental story, how a life is formed, how meaning is found, how mistakes are made, and how we have the courage to go on. If we could ask Sarah what she thinks about the whole thing, she might simply say, TGIF. Everyone leaves somewhere, everyone leaves everyone, and there you go, a small and monumental story. That's it. We have a few things to say, but not that much. And really, I mean, this entire experience, of course, of working on Sarah's, on the installation and the book, has been a complete joy because it started with us standing in the closet and someone blurting out, this has got to be, when Sarah died and we came back, well, this is a museum installation, and actually, my idea was that we keep the installation, we keep her closet as it is, and that my sister would sit there all day long, basically, and wait for people to come, and they would pay her 50 cents or $1. I wasn't sure how much they should pay, and that she would she'd be the docent, like the permanent docent in the apartment, and she rightfully said, "You're completely out of your mind." But there was a kernel of something there, and so we saved everything. And it only took 10 years for it to happen in Alex's museum, which she can tell you a little bit about. But the idea is that if you blurt something out that comes from somewhere deep inside, you should really listen to that and not just say, I'm an idiot. I mean, I could be an idiot, but I'm also an idiot with an idea. And so it's all, it pays to be persistent and never give up, as Winston Churchill said, never, never, never give up. And so...
And it also feels like a really wonderful project, not just because we get to collaborate, which is a real treat for me, but also because it feels like a collaboration between 3 generations, that it's really Sara and Maira and me working together. So there's something that just feels incredibly dreamy and magical about that. And, I had opened this small museum in a little alley in downtown Manhattan, and we didn't exhibit any artwork. We only exhibited objects, vernacular objects, what we consider archaeology, contemporary archaeology, objects from around the world that are revealing who we are and how we feel and what we're thinking and what we want and what we don't want. And we converted a defunct freight elevator into this exhibition space that holds hundreds of objects. And in 2015, we got our second space, another defunct freight elevator, and we're wondering, what do we do with this space? What do we do with this space? And we were talking, and we realized, oh, this is the time and the way to open Sara Berman's closet. So it was in this graffiti-covered alley, which was really wonderful. And then it ended up at the Met.
As things always do. Right. And so, one of the things that we talk, and one of the things that Alex and I talked about in terms of the installation in our philosophy about everything is that we wanted to make it clear, obviously to ourselves, but also to anybody coming to this, that this wasn't a shrine or nostalgia plus, that this was hopefully the opposite, that this was about humanism and history and art and fashion and life and sorrow and humor. But the one thing that it wasn't was a kind of, kitschy shrine to my mother and Alex's grandmother. And so that's a nice way to look at everything that that we do, that it should eliminate the sentimentality, which is always annoying and cloying, and jump to another level of some other kind of communication. So that was a very important part of the process. Indeed. Do you concur? So, now it's traveling and it's going to have different iterations. I mean, you should talk a little bit about how it's going to look maybe in Philly. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, in December, it'll open at the Skirball and it will expand. It was just the closet, and then at the Met, it was the closet and some photos, and at the Skirball, it will be the closet and the paintings and some photos and some other elements. But then when we bring it to the National Museum of American Jewish History in Philadelphia. It's a big new museum that's on Independence Mall, near where they signed the Declaration of Independence and the Liberty Bell. And so when we were looking at the space, we really thought, well, the way to do it here is to install it outdoors as a freestanding monument to freedom and independence, in the sense that the space represents Sara getting her own space and her own freedom and independence. So in 2019, in April, it'll open there, and so you can go and visit the Liberty Bell and Sara Berman's closet.
I mean, I think we want them to have an ad, like their marketing line. It's the Declaration of Independence. What else is there?
The Liberty Bell.
The Liberty, whatever, that other thing. No, the Declaration of Independence, the Liberty Bell, and Sara Berman's bras. So we're hoping that they use that. If we'll mull and see if that's a good way to present this. But we want it also to be always with a sense of humor, in the sense of that there was a tremendous amount of humor in her life and the way we all communicate. So we're hoping that that's translated. And then in the installation on the 5th floor, there'll be a lot of the book will basically come to life, so to speak, and be into a 3-dimensional event. So, and then hopefully we'll travel after that, but we'll see. Do you have anything? No?
Nothing.
So if there are any questions, we can answer them. Okay.
I loved how it was installed at the Met, across from the new Rockefeller women's,
Right.
the dressing room of the
The richest
worship.
woman, Arabella
Yes.
Worsham.
Yes, and I have a 2-part question. One, was that chosen by you? Was the curator involved in that? How did it get put in that sort of really perfect location across from that other new room? And also, I like how you say that this was a room of her own, and it was the first time she really could create her own world. Was she really possessive of her closet while she was alive? Would she let people in there? Was it really her own thing and nobody was allowed to be a part of it?
She wasn't possessive of her closet at all, and that's another thing that's a nice distinction, is that it wasn't about strict rules and coldness and rigidity. It was actually the opposite. It was about warmth and care. And so we were all allowed to go into it. Not that we would spend that much time in there because there wasn't that much to do in there.
If we wanted to, we could do whatever we want. Right.
Yeah, if we wanted to. Except for appreciate it, which we all did throughout all of our lives. And even as children, as little kids, we would look at it as this kind of masterpiece of art and beauty. And sometimes she would come over to our house and we would all organize our closets together as a really fun activity. Again, not begrudgingly, totally joyfully. So it was really about warmth and care and that type of sweetness, and not about coldness or rules, which was a real gift for all of us. At the Met, it was the curator from the Met who had the realization that the closet could be installed to create this dialogue with Arabella Worsham's dressing room. And it was really incredible, actually, because Arabella Worsham was the richest woman in America, married into wealth.
Twice. She married the man, and then she married the nephew when the man went. So she won, she double big money. I mean, the richest woman in the United States then.
And that was in 1882. And exactly 100 years later, in 1982, Sara Berman leaves her husband and finds her own little space, and that's her sense of liberation. And so the way that the kind of narratives around how a woman can feel liberated or empowered is really shifting. And it's also the first type of space in the Met, in the American wing, that wasn't there because of its kind of grand historical relevance or because of its opulence or wealth. It was really its modesty that brought it there. So it's also was really beautiful how it expanded that narrative to not just cover opulence and wealth in the American narrative, but to also include modesty and humbleness and care.
So it stayed there for 9 months, and 200,000 people came to see it. I mean, they were in the museum, but a lot of people came to see to see that. So it got a tremendous response, and it was really, quite wonderful.
Thank you. Here, I have a microphone.
I think I can. Was there anything that you wanted to try to include in the closet that you couldn't figure out how to make it work, or you decided that it just didn't fit the overall?
The gun.
Really?
No.
No, actually, the wonderful thing about curating and collaborating is that you have, two people looking at something and you go, what do you think? And, and somebody says no, and you go, okay, and it's out. So I have no regrets. We did an event and somebody said, did Sara regret leaving? She left a lot of stuff and really came with nothing. And then a small apartment in Greenwich Village, as you saw. So did she regret anything that she left? And I said, without question, no. So the same process, the kind of the clarity of, it's wonderful just to go through stuff and exactly what should be in. I don't think there's anything at all. I mean, I wouldn't know. It's like not having something. It's like I don't even remember what's not there. Yeah?
I'm curious about all those inflatable, whimsical globes, and if they all came at once, or if it was an accumulation.
Well, that was actually, my sister was doing installations in the office that she worked in, and she had used a lot of these globes. So when she was done with it, she brought it to my mother, and my mother loved them, and she had easily about 12 or 15 inflated on the floor all the time. So, sometimes she'd trip and fall, but there was no getting rid of them. And so, you can just imagine if this whole floor was full of inflatable globes and that's how you lived. It was fun. Oh, but what we would do is that after meals, she had a low table. If you remember in the photo, she had a low table, and children's school chairs those were the dining chairs. And then we'd sit afterwards, and somebody would sit on the bed, and somebody would sit in a chair, and we just throw the balls all around the room. And that was after dinner activity.
Right.
So
and no
much fun.
talking and just laughing.
No talking.
Yeah.
I think that clarity piece is part of what makes your writing really interesting to me. Like when you're really confused when you're like 20s about what you want to do in your life, and you talk to other people, and they're like, well, then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and of course I met this person, and then this, and it all sounds very easy. But there's obviously like a lot of emotional turmoil that that doesn't make the cut, like for the book too, you know, like you're not, I would think that Sarah probably thought a little bit before leaving Pesach, and it's in there, in like the silence, I think. But like,
Well, you know what? Well, first of all, I think until the age of 27, life is such hell that I would never relive, you know, the 20s for anything. You know, at 27, you start to see some glimmer of hope. And so everything is very confused, and everything is as a zigzag. There's nothing. I mean, now, of course. But of course, when you tell the story, there's, you know, everything's left out. You know, most of the stuff isn't in there. And no, I don't think she thought about leaving Pesach other than, you know, how women can internalize suffering for, let's say, 38 years, and then one night go completely crazy and say, I have to leave. And then we talk about what it means to, you know, for everybody, but a lot for women, that at a certain point when you say, I can't take it anymore, and that moment comes as a revolution. It doesn't come with like, you know, let me see if I can't take it anymore. You know, at any rate, so drastic actions happen without that much thought, which is kind of amazing also. I mean, when I think of the decisions I made, I mean, barely any thought. But instinct is really what's taking over, and self-preservation. So, you know, it's always complicated. You just choose, and you choose what to tell, of course. Yes?
I have more of a comment than a question. And I went downtown and walked back and forth on the block and looked at the address on my phone. I was like, I'm sure it's here, I'm sure it's here. There, the elevator was closed the day I went. And I somehow missed it, and I sort of stood in front of it thinking, come on, open the door, I'm going to see this. But I just want to thank
That's
you.
a good comment.
Right. Yes.
Did that happen frequently? I mean, it was
I
funny.
think you're the first.
Nobody was ever disappointed. It was always open. I'm surprised it was closed when you were
I was
there.
ready to sleep with you. But I just want to thank you because it's one of the most intimate glimpses at something. And you can see the closet of various famous figures throughout history, and they all seem rather contrived. But when I peeked in Sarah's, I felt like a real voyeur. And it had such a heartfelt feeling, and I thought, wow. And I looked around at other people, and I sort of, because I've met you on a number of occasions, I sort of felt like, well, you better come on, you're peeking in her mother's closet, you know. And I just want to thank you, because it was so delightful to share something so heartfelt. It may have been ironed and studied, but it was delightfully intimate.
Thank you. Well, you know, that it's really very, it's really the way I hope that we always work, which is completely heartfelt, that there isn't any cynicism or archness or coolness. That would be the worst thing that could possibly happen, that you really are telling a true story. You know, you hope a true story, with maybe a few embellishments here and there, but a true story that says something, says something, right? Right, DB?
Something.
I have a couple of questions here.
I'm sorry.
How did you, in terms of your mom and your grandma, how did the storytelling happen? Did she share a lot of stories? Did you ask a lot of questions? How did you learn about her past?
Well, the nature of our family was that there were my mother was two sisters and two brothers who came from Belarus to Israel, to Palestine, to Tel Aviv. And they were all really fantastically funny, irreverent, unsentimental, sometimes kind of nasty storytellers. You know, that in a family where everybody says what they're really thinking. So there were a tremendous amount of stories but I was always very curious, and I'm always with a sketchbook and a journal, and I'm writing down the stories, which are coming, and they're repeated, and I say, tell me again about the cousin who got killed with a bolt of lightning. Really? Yes, really, and this is how it happened. So the stories were repeated, sometimes at my urging and sometimes just family sitting around, and you want to hear basically the same 8 stories over and over again because it's the family lore.
I'm fascinated by the beard story as well.
Yeah, the beard story. Well,
Was that retold many times, of course? Yes.
the beard got longer and longer the more it got retold. But the essence is true.
And a lot of the stories come from the cousins, as asking the cousins and reading the letters.
Right.
There's a lot of cousins, so there's a lot of people.
You know, my cousins, so the second generation of, you know, people who also are, you know, you know, they're not going to be around much longer. So there's a real need to hear all this stuff. And you know, last time I was in Israel, I went to visit, but they didn't know I was interviewing them, but a 96-year-old aunt and then a 97-year-old aunt. The 97-year-old was still hauling laundry up to the roof. I mean, so I was hearing tremendously wonderful stories of life in Belarus and what that was about. So maybe, you know, volume 2.
Yeah.
She had a very close relationship with her sister.
Yes.
That was her only sister.
Yes, she had a very close relationship with her only sister, Shoshana. Yeah.
What was she like?
Shoshana, her sister?
She was a bit punchier.
Punchier. Punchier, yeah.
Not pudgier.
Punchier.
Punchier.
Shoshana was a tomboy, and Sarah was the beauty, and everybody was really nuts for her, but and had a miserable marriage. Shoshana met the man in the village in Belarus and had the most spectacular marriage of anybody that we knew, with 3 children. And so she was the model for me of what a happy marriage is, and how to look at that, you know, to look at one and say, you know, that's not good, and wow, that's good. And you don't even know what you're looking at, but it's somewhere inside of you, you're seeing that. And so Shoshana also, neither of them worked outside of the home, and Shoshana baked and sewed and cooked, all of those things forever, and swam in the ocean every morning at 5. And it was just this tremendously wonderful, and read voraciously. They were, you know, they were something. I think we're pale, you know, as the generations went on, we got paler and paler in persona. Anyway.
I think, we're about out of time.
Yeah, well, sure.
Yeah.
It's all in Russian, all the stories, all the conversations? It's in English, it's in Hebrew?
No, the conversations were in Hebrew. Yeah. Nobody spoke Russian. I mean, maybe a few words. But they came when they were girls, and they really learned Hebrew very quickly, so everything was in Hebrew. And when we came here, they spoke Hebrew to me, and my sister and I answered in English pretty much, because we wanted to assimilate as reasonably quickly as possible. So, you know, the trajectories are epic and wonderful, and also very intimate. Oh, well, that's, okay.
The dressing in white, is it like a practical choice or symbolic, or why is she doing that? I mean, I fantasize about having something like that.
Right.
We never asked her.
Yeah, we don't really know why, but we admired it.
Series?
Wearing white shirts is like a tribute.
No. We always wear white shirts. But you know, we say this often. In the Middle East, white is worn a lot. You know, in the hot, you know, in Mediterranean sun, you're wise to wear white. And so I don't, you know, we don't know.
Maybe for all the reasons that you could imagine.
Everything.
There's a simplicity and a clarity and an elegance and all of that. And she just decided, I mean, that was also the nice thing, is that sometimes, as we were talking about before, a decision is made. It might seem absurd. It might not have an articulated motive, but you just do it, and then you live it, and nobody asks any questions, and on you go.
Forever? No more color.
Forever.